Hi, I'm Scott. I'm a Quiet Place fan.
Hi, I'm Senthil, and I'm a Bird Box fan.
So the two of us have decided, since we disagree, we're going to start watching as many horror movies as we can and come up with a new way of rate them. Come join us.
Good morning, Scott, and Merry Christmas once again.
Hey, Synthil, Merry Christmas. We've got a second film to do today, and I loved it.
It was a doozy. There were elements of it that I really liked, and there are elements of it that I found really confusing. So, really looking forward to diving right into it.
So, Synthil, the one that we're talking about today is Excision. It's a 2012 film by Richard Bates Jr., and this was a micro budget film. And I will say it's probably up there in probably the top five of the ones we've reviewed so far, just because it was downright weird and the ending is not expected. So I did not expect to see that. Now I expected something, but not what occurs at the end. I thought the young lady, and I've got to get her name here real quick because I think it's important. Um, Anna Lynn McCord, who played Pauline. Holy cow! And Ariel Winter, who was Grace. I just thought the acting was really well done in this film. I thought the scenes were really well done. There was a lot I liked about this film. Your thoughts?
It was based off of a 2008 short by the same director.
Yes.
However, clearly, when the budget went up, it's still considered a small budget, and it expanded on what the original short did. And what was surprising to me out of the gate are the actors that this first time director managed to get. We have Tracy Lords as the mother
Yes.
for Pauline. We had Malcolm McDowell as a teacher with
Yeah.
some prominent roles. We had Marlee Matlin with a very minor cameo. We had Ariel Winter. We had Ray Wise. So
Yes.
it's really a bevy of well-known Hollywood stars. So it was a little surprising. I would also caution the audience that there are two versions of this. There is an unrated version you can find on Amazon. There is also an R-rated version, and the unrated version can be extremely disturbing to some of us.
Yes. Yeah, what I will say about this film was, so of course the premise of this is a young lady who wants to get into and become a doctor, but has zero drive. It's basically she does all this talk, but she's got no drive to ever get there. And is really a sociopath at heart, right? But the family doesn't see it. They don't understand it. They don't understand her. People at school don't understand her. She's the nerdy kid, but not nerdy in a way that's, nerdy, like technology, but nerdy, disturbing nerdy, simple. I mean, people are just disturbed by her, and with good rights. And it was so bizarre to the point where she wants to lose her virginity, and the sports guy, the main sport, that everybody is Hottie McHottie, decides to do this, right? And how that all unwinds. And there's so many disturbing parts in this movie that I actually went back. I've seen it twice just because it was, you're just kind of going, what the hell just happened? But it's this whole buildup. Something really bad's going to happen. You know it's coming, but you just don't see it.
I actually kind of anticipated the ending.
Did you?
I did, because of several reasons. The name of the movie. So,
Yeah.
Excision, the definition of excision and kind of removing a body part. The fact that she has multiple psychopathic dreams that involve necrophilia and
Yes.
blood and murder. And she gets off on these extremely violent dreams.
Yes.
And the fact that they set it up from the very beginning that her younger sister, is ill and may not survive. I kind of figured that was the direction it would go. I didn't anticipate the very last scene in the movie where there's some contrition that she shows, because she's psychotic.
Yes.
that was a little bit, caught me off a little bit off guard. The other elements of this that caught me off guard, other than just the sheer visual, gosh, I can't even think of the right term. It's the level of blood and gore and shock value was offset by some really effective comedy elements in
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
There are some lines really well delivered. When they're about to have sex and she says, "Oh, you're too small for the big kind," where she
Yes. Yes. I mean, and I mean, here's the thing, and this is what everybody needs to know is the reason it's comedic is because she is so disturbing in the insane of these lines, and she has absolutely zero intonation. I mean, it's like this flat, monotonous, and so I don't even know what made it weird, Cynthia, was when she would deliver those lines, it was as if she had no idea that she was hurting the other person. It was just matter of fact, right? To her, everything was this matter of fact. Hey, I'm really intelligent. I'm really smart. I'm not trying to say this to hurt your feelings, but yeah, you're not going to fit into the magnums, right? They're going to be too big. And it was just like, wow.
But there are also effective comedy lines where clearly she did know what she was saying. For example, when she goes up to the jock's actual girlfriend and says, "Do you have any STDs?" And she says, "No, it's good. Then I don't either." So,
yes. Yeah. Except though, I don't know. So Cynthia, I'm going to go back on. Did she know that she was trying to me? I don't think in her head throughout this movie, she wasn't trying to say to the cheerleader, "I just banged your boyfriend." It was more of the, yeah, I had sex with this guy and I just wanted to make sure that, I didn't have any STDs either because you've slept with him. So I don't know if she was doing it to get a rise or because she absolutely had no idea that the things she would saying would set people off.
Actually, that's a fascinating question, because what I was keying off of was the actress's facial expressions.
Yes.
It led me to believe that she knew what she was doing, but on the other hand, given all her action throughout the movie, I'm not entirely sure that she's connected to reality or has the ability to relate to people around her. There were a couple of other elements about this that I didn't know what to make of. She, throughout the movie, takes less and less personal care of herself.
Yes.
And as the camera zooms in on her face and does close-ups as the movie goes, it's increasingly apparent that her just basic hygiene is not there. On the other hand, she makes a comment about those who are her classmates who do take a lot of care, and calls them overly made up cum dumpsters. And yes. Is this a feminism movie? Is that what the theme of this movie it really is?
I don't think so at all. I think this is a movie about a break from reality, right? She is so desperate. Here, it's a sociopath or psychopath, whichever one you want to call it, trying to find a connection with her mother, desperate for a connection with her mother. And throughout this film, it's kind of this idea of, usually it's daddy issues. You come up at most of these horror films are, the girl has daddy issues, right? It's, oh, my dad was a scumbag, or, like stepfather and all that crap. This was truly a daughter-mother that had nothing in common ever. It felt like she was a mistake throughout the entire film, right? So this was just, it was a mom and dad who were having to put up with her, not spending time with her. And so at the end of the movie, what makes the end of this movie so tragic in my mind was that, yes, this throughout it, like you said, Cynthia, she's having these psychotic breaks where she's basically, she's getting off to these visions of murder and everything else like this. But at the end of it, I think she genuinely thought she was helping and saving in order to get a connection with her mother. And it made it genuinely, to me, uncomfortable. The ending was so uncomfortable because I think she really thought she was doing the right thing.
It did come across. There's another element of the that I'm curious about your thoughts on. There are comments about religion throughout. She prays. She prays
Yes.
to God, but clearly doesn't believe quite in church. Doesn't go to church. Doesn't seem to believe in religion. There's one point where she's staring directly at the audience through the camera and says, "Science and religion doesn't mix." There's
Yep.
another one where she's praying that her mom dies with extreme pain, and as she's talking to God, she says, "You can always blame it on the devil." And it's said with a level of sarcasm. So how does religion play into this movie?
I think again, this is, you know, a character trying to find herself, trying to understand what she is. And I think at one point we all turn and go, you know, is there a God? So I'm going to pray to God and see if he'll answer the question about what it is. Why am I not loved? Right? Why do I not fit in? And I think where this film is so disturbing to me, Simple, and I ended up watching it a second time, is because of the violence in schools today, right? The recent one, right, where the parents actually knew that their son
Yeah.
was going to potentially do something harmful and did nothing about it. It's the disconnect of our families from their kids where this film got very concerning for me, because you see the parents knowing
Yeah.
that their daughter, that there is something psychologically wrong with their daughter, and yet they refuse to address it, admit to it, understand it, and it leads to this very depressing ending, which why it makes it even harder is because the mom knows that she knew that this was going to happen. You see the reaction from the mother knowing that she's seen this all along. And so for me, this religious undertone is this whole idea of trying to find out who the hell I am, because I don't care if you're an atheist or not. At some point in your life, you've gone through and you've gone, maybe there is. And you've had that moment of prayer, right? Oh God, please let me survive this. And I promise to be good. Even if you're an atheist, you've said those words out of your mouth. And I think that's what this was, right? I think this is that desperation to understand who she was, because nobody understood her.
Yeah, that's an interesting, frightening parallels with what happened in reality recently.
Yes.
The prosecutor in this real life case has even talked about the shooter having been torturing animals,
Yes.
and the parents either not aware or ignoring what was going on. You know, your perspective is probably it's a little different light to the movie than what I looked at, because for me, the religious elements, the lack of personal care and the camera focus on her, and clearly her lack of personal care was degrading. Kind of, and the apparent feminist overtones. Not that that's I have a problem with it. It seemed like there were multiple themes throughout the movie that threw me off, and I thought the story was. I heard one review talk about it as splatter porn, gore porn,
Yeah.
and that it was going for shock value. But if you frame it from the perspective of a mentally disturbed adolescent looking for meaning, and the only way she knew how, it does put some context in the many themes throughout the movie.
Simple, I can totally see how a reviewer would go, look, this was just splatter porn. This was because, look, there's a lot of sexuality in this film. But I also just want to remind everybody, young men, young women go through a sexual realization as they're in high school, right? And so you want to be adored by people. And look, that is even when I was in high school, right? You had the jocks, you had the cheerleaders, you had the emo kids and everything. You're trying to find your place. And not only that, all of your hormones are going insane, right? So here's this girl who obviously has no relationships with her parents, is in high school, is trying to find some way that she connects with people in some way. So she's a pathological liar, right? Because again, pathological liars are looking for some affirmation of who they are. Pathological liars lie because they have zero self-confidence. So I looked at this film from this idea of This is a girl who is a sociopath who more than likely might not have been from an early age, but became that because she was competing against a younger sister who had been ill her entire life. So her parents' love and attention had always been on the younger sister, never on her. She was trying to find any way at all that she could connect. So, hey, if I become a doctor, maybe I can save my sister, and that's the connection to my mother. But with zero drive to do so, right? So instead, lie about it, right? So I'm going to lie. I'm going to pathological lie through it, and that is for me why the ending was so dramatically hard to watch, because in my mind, she really was trying to win her mother's affection. She really was trying at the end to save her sister
In
in
the
the
only
worst way possible.
psychotic way that she knew how.
Yeah, yeah,
In her mind, there's some, from final thoughts from my end. I was watching this and got probably maybe a quarter of the way through, and Babs was watching it with me. My wife was watching it with me, and I had to stop. I had to stop the movie because I thought it was too disturbing. I didn't feel comfortable watching it with my wife, and I warned
yep.
her that this is probably significantly more gruesome, bloody, and disturbing than she's used to. And so we had a brief conversation where she asked me, "Is this horror, and what makes this horror?" And it's an interesting question that we've faced before.
Yes.
There's some horrific elements to this movie. It's horrific in her disconnection, her clear psychotic break, her fascination with blood and pain and murder makes this horrific. But I'd have a real difficult time recommending this. Obviously, this is not mainstream horror. Recommending this except to the hardcore fans who are used to the broad spectrum of horror.
Yeah, and Cynthia, I actually disagree. I would recommend this highly. Like I said, this now has gotten up into my top group of some of these low budget horror films we've watched, and the reason is because I thought the characterization was great. I thought the storyline was extremely disturbing. I know that they were trying to add humorous elements, but it was, to me, that humor was added to show how her degradation over time, like you were talking about, and I thought this was truly horror. And the reason you and I have talked about this, Simple, about what is horror, and I think horror is different for everybody, right? Some people can watch a rape scene and go, "Oh, that's not horror." But if you've been raped, that's absolutely sheer terror, right? So, to me, this, especially with all the violence that is taking place in schools, with the increase in our inability to control our inner demons. I mean, yeah, I think it's become more obvious with this COVID stuff going around, Simple, that we have become less socially able to connect with people in, I think, positive ways. Now, I'm not saying that we've gone completely downhill, but go to the grocery store and listen to the way that people talk to each other. Be on the road, people are driving like, insanity, right? We have lost our minds. Somewhere over the last few years, we've lost our minds, and our kids have really lost their minds. And whether you call it technology, call it social media, call it whatever, that you can't meet the Joneses. You're never going to be the Instagram favorite, right? When you and I were in high school, yeah, did I get bullied? I got bullied, but it was a very narrow section, right? So I survived it. There was no social media, so I couldn't have people calling me these names on. So suddenly you start building this up. And to me, this movie is a complete story of the total tear down, breakdown of a girl's psyche that was already fractured to begin with, right? And it's her total downhill. And it was depressing. I thought it was horrifying to watch when you take it into aspects of things happening in our lives today, and that we are ignorant to as we watch people, this young lady, right? And she was the girl I would have made fun of in high school too. I think we all would have, right? You got to be careful of who you're making fun of, right? Because you don't know what they're going through and what they're capable of. And that's what we're starting to see in society through social media is this emo, these kids that we called emo had severe psychological things going on in their lives, depression, anxiety, and all that, just ignorance. Anyway, that's the way I saw it. And I'm not trying to make a big psychological thing out of this, but the reason I love this so much, Cynthia, was because I think it really dug that soil and planted a seed for me as to, holy crap, this was depressing and sad.
I can totally see that. The reason it wouldn't be a high recommend for me, aside from the hardcore fans, is I thought that there are elements in the movie, the level of gruesome violence, the fetus scene, for example,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
distracted from the core element of an adolescent trying to win the affection and relate to her mom. And
Yeah.
when you see that fetus scene, it's hard to justify that as anything more than either some sort of a religion, feminism comment, or just shock value. And when you go for shock value, I think it distracts a little bit. And Babs, I could never sit and watch this with Babs. She's not a horror fan.
Yeah.
I could sit and watch Insidious, Saw.
Yeah.
But then again, those are mainstream, right? Those are mainstream horror.
Yeah. And I'd be interested to talk about that later too, Cynthia, which is, to me, Saw, I can't watch that with, I mean, I didn't watch this one with Tracy, right? I'm very particular about it. I'll tell her, look, this isn't something you're going to want to watch, right?
Yeah.
I just finished, and I know we've already gone over time on this, but I don't know if you've watched Two on Netflix. It's about the people who wake up and they're sewn together. It was a disturbing.
I saw that. I mean, I haven't seen it. I saw about it.
Yeah, so it's disturbing as hell. And Tracy walked in and she goes, "You're watching a porno." And I'm like, "No, it's a Netflix horror film that looks like a porno, right?"
Yeah.
And so there's elements of horror. Like for me, for Saw, I couldn't sit and watch that with Tracy because to me, that is just, there's nothing, it's just torture. All the Saw films are, and don't get me wrong, when I was younger, loved Saw films. My God, Final Destination, different ways to kill people, rock on. But it really is just torture porn. Saw is no different than Hostel or anything else. It's torture porn. To me, when you watch something like this, it's horror cinema. It is telling a story. Saw is telling no story. There's no story other than how can we kill as many people possible in most grotesque ways as possible. I thought this film was actually trying to tell a story about a psychotic break. We're watching her in her head. She's a sociopath that doesn't realize she's a sociopath yet. And so her dreams, these sexual horrific dreams of necrophilia and blood and the fetus and everything else like that, is her brain trying to justify that it's all right. Everybody has this. Everybody feels this way because that's all she knows. And because nobody will talk to her and her family ignore her, she has no way of an outlet for that. So it comes out in the sexuality, right? It comes out in this. So yeah, for me, I'm with you. Would I watch this with Tracy? Would I even watch this with you or somebody else? Probably not. If I'd seen this in a theater and I'd been with somebody else, I would have been like, holy shit. But for people who like horror, I think this is up there at the top of, yes, it's gruesome, but it had a good story.
It's definitely a topic I want to discuss in the future. What happens when there's a horror movie that you're not comfortable watching with somebody else?
Yeah.
It's like watching dirty porn at some level. And what are the implications of being uncomfortable watching it with somebody else? Should you be able to watch a horror movie with somebody else? And what does it mean if it doesn't? So
I'd love to have that conversation, Cynthia, because I think you and I have talked about this a lot, which is, I think there is horror for the sake of fun. The Halloween movies, right?
Yeah.
I just watched Halloween 2 last night. I know, Christmas Eve, great thing. But we had just reviewed Halloween, so I wanted to see Halloween 2 again and see how that went.
Yeah.
That I could sit and watch with people. It's horror, right? Films like this one, Excision, I think it's a personal horror film. You're watching it alone. You're watching it and going, wow, this is disturbing to me. I agree with you. I'd love to pick this up at another time.
Well, it's been once again a fantastic conversation. Just a final warning to our audience. This is a deeply disturbing movie. I think Scott and I both recommend it, potentially to different audiences, but if you're a horror fan, you should check this out.